Last night you were
Yes.
I had the good fortune to go to this lovely concert at Artipelag, which is a beautiful art gallery, I suppose we'd call it, isn't it?
Yeah,
on
it
the
is.
outskirts of Stockholm.
It is.
In the archipelago itself.
Yeah. And the building itself is a piece of art.
It is, isn't it? It's rather spectacular. And I must go when it's light next time.
Yeah.
And you played a lovely set of a rather sort of subdued set, I thought.
Yeah.
And with the Klaus Kroner trio,
Yes.
with whom you played in Sweden last year.
Yes.
And so this was last night was the second date in a 4-day tour?
Third date. Third date. Yeah. And then we'll come back to Sweden later in November.
Really?
Yeah, in early November to do 3 or 4 more dates.
Okay, where in the south of Sweden? Or are you
No, I
coming
think we'll still be based. We'll be staying in Stockholm and going out and doing day trips.
Okay, great.
So, yeah, don't ask me where.
Okay, all right. And among the pieces that were played in the first half was "Close Your Eyes,"
Yeah.
by Tennant. I've forgotten who wrote it.
Bernice Petkier.
Yeah.
One of those rare beasts. Sort of female composer of the 1930s. I mean,
it goes back a long way, doesn't it? That song,
not
31, I think, is it?
Yeah, not that rare, but rare enough to be noteworthy.
Yeah. And it's Stacey mentioned and this is the interesting point that we covered last night.
Yeah.
That she was hit to this song or inspired by it because of the version done by Dudley Moore and Marion Montgomery.
Yeah.
Back in 66.
Okay, 66.
I googled it.
It was
this
a
morning.
very good year.
Yeah, it was a good year. 'Cause that's when you were born. So.
It is. And England won the World Cup. And
Yeah. So you're. But I was intrigued by that because that wasn't what I expected Stacey to say. And the other interesting bit was the audience's reaction to that comment, because anyone with the knowledge of Britain and British music, like me, would have instantly recognised that and be familiar with the clip. I mean, it's a piece of Dudley Moore Trio and Marion Montgomery,
right,
playing this song in black and white on Not Only But Also, which was a Dudley Moore Peter Cook comedy vehicle, for want of a better description.
And Dudley Moore has had a ridiculously swinging trio, and Marion Montgomery was on as a guest, and they're sort of having fun with this, and Marion is singing it in her sort of typically coquettish way, and there's a sort of fun interplay with them, and Dudley Moore is he corpses her because he's so funny.
Yeah, and he plays this great solo near the beginning, a third of the way in, and then he starts mucking about, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Which spoils it for me actually, but I think it sort of sums up Dudley Moore in many ways, doesn't it?
It does. It's like he's
he could be so good and so bad.
Yeah, I think in a sense it's one of those things. It's like when you have he could have been just an amazing musician. He was an amazing musician, and he's an amazing comedian. Yeah. And those two talents, which kind of spring from the same well, I think there's this kind of playfulness and desire to improvise and ability to interact with other members of the trio or of whatever sort of comedy group he's part of. He has that same kind of ability in music, and when he mixes them, sometimes the one takes away from the other.
Yeah, I think so.
It's one of those things. It's like you can have an embarrassment of riches.
Yes, and what I meant to say about the audience, but didn't get around to saying, was that there was very little recognition amongst what is essentially a Swedish audience of who Dudley Moore is. Never mind Marion Montgomery.
Sure.
I mean, nobody now. I don't know how many people listening to Marion Montgomery these days all remember whether they're British or continental European. And even though she was an American, I don't know how. I mean, God knows whether anyone listens to her in the States. But
Yeah.
but you had some interesting things to say about Marion, and you had some dealings with her in the past.
Sure.
I should say that Marion Montgomery died in 2002, I think.
Yeah. Wow, not long ago.
Yeah, it seems like yesterday, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a long time ago.
Crazy.
It is absurd.
So, when Stacey and I first were in London, Marion was playing around the scene a lot. She was always at Ronnie's every year. She maybe did a couple of weeks a year.
Okay.
She played the Pizza Express, Pizza on the Park.
Yeah, which is where I saw her with Richard Rodney Bennett.
And and we
We talk about him as well.
yeah, we Stacey and I went to the Guildhall School of Music, and sort of the key rhythm section professors there were Trevor Tompkins and Jeff Klein, and Trevor and Jeff were sort of regular members of Marilyn's backing band.
Yeah. Was Laurie Holloway her husband?
Yes.
He would have been part of that as well, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he was when he was available. Laurie was always busy doing TV work and studio work and so on. So I'm trying to think. Ordinarily, when we would have seen Marion, it would have been maybe John Haller on piano. So that would have been the trio: John Haller, Jeff Klein.
Do you mind?
No, go ahead. Trevor Tompkins, and so anyway, it was sort of natural. It's like Jeff and Trevor had a gig, would be doing a gig in London, and these are the guys who are running our small bands and part of the teaching crew at the Guildhall. We'd go down to the gig,
Okay.
and that's kind of how we met Marion. And Marion, obviously, I think probably because of the connection with Jeff and Trevor, came into the Guildhall to do a workshop, and it was a workshop about performance technique, stagecraft.
Yeah.
And it's a jazz course in the early 90s, and it's mostly sort of guys on the course, and it's mostly instrumentalists, and Marion was very much a sort of theatrical cabaret type.
Yes.
There's this phrase, song stylist is how a lot of people would have described her, rather than a sort of jazz singer. But I'm not. I don't have any access to grind at all. She was just a great singer, and she delivered songs in her own kind of special way.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about her ability to hold an audience.
Yeah.
When she was,
Oh,
at her
for
peak.
sure. And so she came into the Guildhall to give that workshop, and there was a sort of degree of skepticism, I suppose, in the room from some of the more gnarly die-hard jazz musicians about what this was going to be about, because Marion Montgomery was a long way from their sort of main sphere of musical interest, let's say that.
Absolutely.
But actually, she just gave you the information about what it is you need to know to be on stage. It's like, what do you wear? Well, Marion wore her thing. She wore her big gowns and wigs and so on. But she wasn't there to proselytize for her style of presentation.
No.
But what she was there to say is, presentation is important.
Yeah.
You are on stage,
Yeah.
You are presenting your music. And she was talking about experiences of her life in music. It's like, from a presentational point of view, what do you happen when the drummer throws up on the bandstand?
Did that ever happen, by the way?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you do when the drummer throws up?
Exactly. You carry on.
You carry on. Okay. I hope he recovers quickly.
Yeah.
Have you actually learned? Have you studied stagecraft? You and Stacey.
No, but you, and I've. No. Kind of think about
curious.
it. You kind of, I do. I don't wear random clothes when I go on the stage.
No. But I'm just,
and you.
all the way you behave. I mean, that was one of my questions. Had we done the Around the World in 80 Days discussion?
Sure.
Because I was talking to a Danish pianist mate of mine, and he went to one of these things, organised by the Danish cultural body, and they said, look, there are differences within Europe of how you should actually approach the art of performance. So in Germany they like it one way, not so much talking. I can't remember what the differences are. And in France they wanted another way, more chatting perhaps.
Right.
I don't know whether you've ever noticed these cultural preferences among the audiences you play to, because they're so nationally diverse, aren't they?
I think my experience obviously primarily is of being on stage with Stacey, and what Stacey does seems to work wherever, because and if anyone asked me, and thankfully nobody does, but if anyone asked me for advice, my thing is, my advice would be, find a way of being on stage that is comfortable for you, and in which you present yourself naturally. Be who you are. That if you construct a stage image which doesn't ring true, it's not going to ring true. No. That's going to detract from people's enjoyment of the music. And when I say be yourself, sometimes that has to be a construct of yourself. Because being on stage is an artificial thing. It is transformational when you walk up onto a platform, and it's like you're standing in front of a few hundred people, and now I am going to play the saxophone to you. That's not the same as walking into a room.
No, of course not. And do you think was Marion Montgomery like her? Was her stage persona the same as she was, privately?
I would say that Marion was her stage persona. She was herself. That's what she was like off the stage. It was sort of more constructed and controlled on stage, and built around a set of music and so on. But she had this kind of. She played the Southern belle, which she was.
Yeah, she was born in Mississippi, wasn't she?
And how she spoke on stage was how she spoke off stage. She was very attractive, very charismatic, which she was on stage and off. She was a little more fruity off stage in her language. She clearly spent a lot of time around musicians, and was comfortable, and that was dialed back on stage. Although she would occasionally give a little hint, that the kind of refined Southern belle thing, that there was another side to it. So she was a lot of fun. I know. I don't know what made me think. That made me think of her. And then nobody talks about Marion Montgomery. And occasionally I post Dudley Moore clips on Facebook. Right. And I get these weird comments like, I didn't know he played the piano. I was thinking, where have you been? Right.
You really didn't know that?
Yeah.
And of course, this kind of blank reaction last night from a primarily Swedish audience. Who's Dudley Moore?
Right. I think one of the reasons that Stacey always references that when we play Close Your Eyes is in a sense not to elicit a response of recognition. She's actually proselytizing. Go check this out. Because nowadays you can do that as well. It's there on YouTube. Absolutely, and so on. It's like it's worth seeing. It's like infomercial.
Okay, good. That's very good. Because not much. Very little seems to survive in Marion Montgomery. That wasn't on. Not only but also because she was a sort of resident singer. I think she was also Michael Parkinson's resident singer for a while.
Yeah.
So if you track down some of Parky's 70s interviews, you might find her popping up there. They usually cut out the music bits.
Yeah.
And of course, the Dudley Moore stuff is really few and far between. There's a lovely one of him. Have you seen the one with him playing with his trio? It's not the same trio because Pete McGurk died in '68.
Right.
He committed suicide.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
His girlfriend left him and he was distraught.
Hmm.
So he was replaced by Pete Morgan, who's a Welshman.
Right, yeah. I know.
But the drummer was Chris Caron, who's I think an Australian.
Yeah.
I think Pete Morgan died a couple of years ago, and then Caron is still alive, as far as I know.
Right,
May
yeah.
even still be working.
There were two Pete Morgans who
Were
were...
there two Pete Morgans?
Yeah,
Were they both bassists?
both bassists.
God, that is confusing.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
so...
That's like Kent, there are two Kenny Washingtons.
Yeah, so exactly. So and Benny Green as well is quite the name. How many Benny Greens are there? You know, at least 3 that I can think of.
There's 2 Finnish piano players who are really good actually, and
Yeah.
they've got exactly this Thomas Twirler. I don't know.
Okay.
That's really confusing.
Yeah. There are 3 Jim Tomlinsons.
Are there? Who are the other 2?
One is a guitarist,
Yeah.
American guitarist, and the other is a songwriter out in LA
Really?
who has ended up collecting the royalties on some of my compositions.
No, that's outrageous.
So, thanks to an administrative cock-up by BMI. But
God,
yeah,
that's funny.
so yeah, what are the chances?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Pete Morgan, 2 bass players. So Welsh Pete Morgan was yeah, as opposed to the other Pete Morgan was.
They did this concert in 1971 in Sydney for ABC,
Right.
Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and Dud is remarkably restrained actually, and I always prefer that clip to
Right.
although there's so much to enjoy in the Montgomery and Moore one.
Yeah.
I always prefer that later clip because he seems to be taking the music. Well, he's taking it much more seriously. I mean, there's
Right.
still humour and levity.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's Dud at his very best, you know, doing something that too few people were aware of,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. It's funny the phrase taking it seriously, because, you know, I'm not even because comedians take comedy seriously.
They're the most appalling sort of manic depressives, aren't they?
And I think it's, you know, I do think of it in terms of just doing the one thing as opposed to taking it seriously, because I think even when he was goofing around and mixing comedy with music, he was taking it seriously.
Yeah.
He was just mixing the genres.
Okay, so I'm barking up the wrong tree.
Well, I'm not saying that.
criticising
It's just that it's a turn of phrase that, you know, it's worth unpacking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is
Because I have no basis for saying that Dud didn't take music seriously, or he did take it seriously, but I don't think you can get that good if you don't take it seriously.
Yeah, sure.
And so it resolves to just doing one thing,
Yeah.
you know, as it were.
Yeah. I just wonder whether he spread himself too thinly, or
Yeah.
maybe that was just his makeup, and he was destined to be half comedian, half musician.
Right, sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like Dean
So-
Martin, or
Yeah, and some people use comedy as a also in situations to cover up for a feeling of insecurity. Maybe there was an element of that as well. It's like he kind of felt like it's like if he had any sort of touch of kind of self-consciousness playing music, he would resort to comedy as a means of compensating for that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're a fan of Dudley Moore, right?
Oh yeah,
Do
totally.
you listen to it from time to time?
Yeah.
Because again, there's so few recordings. They all sound like they were done in the toilet or something. There's loads of tape work.
Right. Sure.
Because I don't know. There's a couple of records. The Wonderful World of Dudley Moore or something.
But it's just
Volumes 1 and 2.
it's just swinging piano trio.
Yeah, it is.
And
It's like Moore has got 2 speeds, fast and slow, and nothing in between.
Yeah.
I don't know.
yeah.
Can I ask you
which
about...
is missing one of them, because Ben Webster said there's 3 speeds: slow, medium, and a fast.
There you go. There never seems to be any medium with Dudley Moore.
Yeah.
And it's very much of its time, isn't it? That kind of mid-60s fascination with bossa and samba.
Sure.
You know, his version of goodness, Autumn Leaves.
Right.
Do you remember that one?
No, it's not.
It's super fast.
Okay.
You know, and it's just like a sort of fucked up bossa track.
Right.
But it works.
Okay. Right.
You know,
Sure.
It's sort of sacrilegious almost.
Right.
How could you do that to that
Right.
song, which is used as maybe best as a ballad,
Right.
but more just sort of rips it apart and reassembles it as this.
Right.
You know, she did with basically everything.
Right. Sure.
Tell me about some of the other British jazzers you came across. Can I ask about Tubby Hayes? Because I know that. I mean, Mackie Hayes died in '73, so you would never have met him, of course. But I keep coming across Tubby Hayes nerds. It's amazing, actually. You know, every last little thing about him. I had no idea there was this entire sort of subculture attached to Tubby Hayes.
There really is.
You probably know rather a lot about him.
No, I don't. I know very little about him, and I can sort of understand. I can understand there being this kind of subculture because he was a virtuoso. He was an absolutely amazing straight-ahead bebop tenor player.
Yeah.
And managed to absorb that whole kind of idiom better than any other British saxophonist of the era. And, you know, long before there was anything, you know, like the tools, educational tools, self-educational tools, whatever, you know, that there are today.
Yeah.
It's like he obviously just had a gift for that music. And he just stood out, both in the small band and the big band.
Did he influence you when you were learning?
One of the things I remember back in the good old days of the BBC when they played jazz was they had a whole day of jazz on the BBC, maybe in the early 80s.
On television?
On television.
God, you'd never see that now.
No,
would you?
It was called Jazz on a Summer's Day, and it was just a whole day of jazz on the TV. And they showed some of the 625s, including the Tubby Hayes Big Band. And so I heard that, and it was like, wow, that's great. And, you know, I took it down on VHS and played it a million times, and tried to kind of learn what I could from it.
Yeah, okay.
You know, as a kid.
Yeah.
But
he is spoken of in reverential tones, isn't he? And you know, and sort of extremely highly regarded. Not just because he died. I mean, I don't know whether dying young has helped his career.
Well, yeah, it depends at what point in your career you do die young.
Yeah.
You know, Parker died young, and you know his career, because it was truncated in that way, looks meteoric. You know, one doesn't know how these musicians would have continued to develop, whether they would have continued to develop.
Yeah.
Sometimes when musicians kind of reach that point of virtuosity and become sort of, you know, ossified in what they do, it's like you regard their earlier work through a different lens. So maybe, you know, maybe it's one of those things where dying young can help you. Not help you, it doesn't help your career, but but it affects how your career is viewed.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Can I ask you about, did you ever come across Johnny Dankworth and Cleo Laine?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about that. Because, you know, I mean, Dankworth, you see, I did do my research. Dankworth, at 7 o'clock this morning, Dankworth died in 2010, can you believe that?
No.
Nearly 20 years ago.
10 years ago.
I'm sorry, 10 years ago, that's not my strong point. Cleo Laine is now 91.
Yeah. So they have a venue up in Milton Keynes, Wavendon, near their home. called the Stables, and it actually used to be in the Stables.
I thought it was going to close, the Stables.
Oh, well, it's still going.
Still going,
because
okay.
we played there in the spring.
Okay.
And there was a radio series on, I can't remember, probably Radio 2, live from the Stables, and they used to put on a sort of, it was kind of a variety music show, and John and his big band would always would be like the backing band, and they would invite sometimes pop singers, sometimes West End, show tune singers and jazz singers and so on, and we did that a couple of times. And they were just what Cleo still is, but just nice people. Yeah. I mean, Cleo is obviously extremely well known and a very kind of distinct
Dame Cleo Laine.
Yeah, exactly. Distinct voice. And John was just a sort of, in a sense, he's sort of kind of feel a kindred spirit. I'm not saying he is a kindred spirit, but I feel a kindred spirit to John because, he was a saxophonist, but also, you can't resume John into just being that, because he was an arranger, he was an MD, he's a sort of entrepreneur, he was a kind of, he was a person, and they were a jazz couple, saxophone and vocal jazz couple. So the
king and queen of British jazz bands at that time in the
absolutely
mid-70s.
They were sort of regulars on mainstream television and so on.
Because to some extent, Dankworth, it makes me think of Laurie Holloway, because they were doing similar things. Yeah,
I think.
You expressed some skepticism last night about Laurie Holloway.
Well, Johnny Dankworth always seemed closer, sort of stayed closer to a kind of jazz aesthetic of making music, whereas Laurie's aesthetic of making music sort of moved much towards the sort of the commercial, the studio, and so on.
Yeah.
So his kind of everything got kind of polished, and there's a sort of question, especially with Laurie's later playing, is like whether he kind of polished the life out of it.
Yeah. But he was very well known, wasn't he? Probably better known than Dankworth.
Yeah, but
because the Morecambe and Wise shows, being the musical director of all these BBC things in the 70s.
Parkies. Yeah. I mean, and his name would always appear on credits of having written TV themes and so on.
He did loads of TV themes.
Yeah,
very well known. I've forgotten which ones, but
Blankety Blank is one.
Yes, Blankety Blank. Yeah, that'll confuse the Americans.
Yeah.
What is this goddamn thing?
Blankety Blank. It's
let's not go into Blankety Blank.
It's a riff tune based on Perdido. There you go.
Is it really? Okay.
Okay.
I believe you.
But there are all these so great jazz musicians from that era who wrote wonderful TV music, like Duncan Lamont.
And the other interesting thing is that Dankworth was doing a lot of stuff in the 60s, probably early 70s as well. He was doing a lot of corporate stuff. So there's this marvellous film, you can watch it on YouTube, and I think I'm gonna stick it underneath this interview when I put it up.
Okay.
The links, the things we've discussed. He did something for BOAC, a sort of travelogue thing.
Okay.
Around the world in whatever it was, in those days in 48 hours or something.
Yeah.
It's full of all these. I'd like a ticket to New York.
Right. Okay.
Which flight, madam?
Right. Oh, okay.
And the music is sensational.
I'm sure.
It's absolutely. It gets a bit cheesy in parts.
Right.
They go to all the continents. They go to Africa. So then Johnny Slicks did a few bonkers.
Right. Okay.
But it swings. It's clever.
Yeah.
It draws you in. It's a phenomenal piece of work, and it makes me think. I love it. The British companies, even in the 60s, had the confidence and the willingness to invest.
Right.
If you can call it an investment.
Yeah.
To pay money for top quality work in a way that nobody would do that now.
Yeah. And in his writing and arranging, he was always kind of trying things out.
Yeah.
You know, he's sort of that kind of 60s era of when everything was experimental.
Yes.
He sort of carried that aesthetic through his whole career.
Yeah.
You know, through his whole life.
Yeah, that's true.
Always sort of listening to young musicians, playing with young musicians, listening to whatever was new, and trying to work that into his music.
Yeah.
It was.
Do you sometimes think it might have been nicer to have been born in the late 40s, say, to have experienced all this?
Yeah. Yes and no.
Yes and no.
It's one of the. Let's not go there. You know, we are where we are.
Yeah. And you knew Ronnie Scott, I'm assuming. From
Yeah.
Your old young days at Ronnie Scott's
Sure.
Soho.
And
You started off in it. You were in one of his bands, weren't you?
well, Ronnie and Pete were still running the club when Stacey and I started playing there.
Yeah.
And the first time that I actually played there, was depping for Ronnie because he was having trouble with his teeth.
Right.
And John Christensen, Ronnie's pianist, who was a neighbour and friend up in North London, said get Jim Tomlinson to come in, and so I played a week at Ronnie's. And
How old were you then?
I'm guessing it was sort of around 2000. So
Yeah, okay.
yeah, that would have made me. I can't even
Your
do the
maths
maths.
is worse than mine. I can't.
Yeah.
Swedes do this. I say, how old are you? And they go, I was born in 62. Oh,
Yeah.
What the hell is that?
Yeah,
Why don't you just
exactly.
tell me how old you are?
Because I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have been in my early 30s.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So around then, I played there with Nigel, played there with Stacey, but Ronnie would hang out and listen to the sound checks and have comments and so on.
Yeah.
He was not an effusively friendly guy or anything
No, I
like
wonder.
that.
Well, he was famously bad-tempered, wasn't he, with the audience?
But he would listen, and you know, he would say, "That's nice, that's good." You know, you got the words wrong on that. It's like you should check the changes to that. You know, he was interested in what we were doing, and you know, that is a compliment.
What are your feelings about Ronnie Scott's the club itself? I know you have an annual residency, don't you?
Yeah.
Because it has an outsized reputation or prestige among musicians and the public. It's not fair to say outsized, actually. It has a very high reputation.
Sure.
And yet, some musicians I've spoken to said, "Well, you know, it's all okay. It's great to get a gig there, but you know, the audiences are often, you know, not they're just on some sort of tourist round and not terribly interested." I don't know what your feeling is about that. Which is one of the things that used to irritate the hell out of Ronnie, of course, because he was constantly telling them to shut up and stop talking.
Sure.
He did that to me once. When I was a student.
Yeah, I think we've all had that experience. Well, part of that is a romanticisation of a golden era of jazz clubs that never existed.
Okay.
First of all, listen to any live recording from Birdland, from, you know, any of those classic live recordings from the half note.
Yeah.
From the audience is yakking away.
But that's American audiences, aren't they? They're awfully noisy, aren't they? I mean, they're the worst in the world, aren't they?
So, and I guess if you have a noisy audience, this is back to Marion Montgomery, right? Marion Montgomery never had noisy audiences.
Well, she's probably terrified of it, weren't they?
Stacey never has noisy
I'm
audiences.
terrified of Stacey. We're constantly being told off about our phones by Stacey.
Yeah, well, you know, there you go.
She didn't do it last night.
No, she didn't.
They were very good last night.
They were very good last night. But
I just wonder why, you know, it's a phenomenal brand, hasn't it, Ronnie Scott?
sure.
And I don't really understand why that happened.
If you have a
Why did
noisy
that happen?
audience, you have to ask yourself as a performer, why are people not listening?
Okay, yeah.
You know, it's like don't complain about the audience.
Yeah.
They came to listen.
Yeah.
They paid an entrance fee to come and listen to music, and if they end up talking, there's probably something about the music that isn't holding them.
Yeah. But why is Ronnie Scott's club the icon it has become?
History.
Is it? It's not because Ronnie Scott was so phenomenal that his legend lives on, is it?
Well, there's partly that.
It's
I mean,
easy.
obviously, there's the name. The name is on the club, and Ronnie is, Ronnie was a great figure. It's iconic.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think the club successfully continues the tradition. Obviously, all clubs have to kind of, you have to change with the times and so on, and the way the music environment changes. I mean, I go in there and.
It must be like going back home for you.
Yeah, it is. You still have a sense of continuity.
Yeah.
Of kind of tradition.
Yeah, and you do two shows a night when you do it.
It's two shows at the weekends and two sets in the weekdays.
Okay, right. I mean, that's a very kind of American approach, isn't it?
Yeah, the weekend kind of routine.
Yeah.
In American clubs, you do two shows, full stop.
Yeah, and they're all and 5-night jobs are very common, aren't they?
Yeah, 5-night runs normally sort of Tuesday through Saturday.
Yeah. Don't you do one in DC?
Yeah, we play Blues Alley.
Blues Alley, that's
as
it.
well.
Yeah.
We'll do that later in the year.
Yeah. Is that really super hard work?
It is for Stacey. It's hard on the voice.
It must be.
Not the singing part, but the late night, and the sort of the between shows, the signing, having to sort of cool down and warm up again, and it's like doing a double marathon.
Yeah, no, it must be exhausting. Yeah, and Stan Tracey. Did you ever come across Stan Tracey?
Yeah.
Tell me about Stan.
Stan, never knew Stan that well, didn't play in any of his bands, but we did some shows, sort of double bill, triple bill type shows. We were part of a touring kind of package. We did a few concerts called Ellington 2000, where it was like 3 bands maybe. Stan's trio, Stacey's band, and I can't remember the other. It might have been a sort of mainstream trad band or something, but all playing all the music of Duke Ellington. Not all of the music, but all the music was music of Duke Ellington.
Yeah.
And
but he was much more. He could be much more experimental than that. Couldn't he?
Oh yeah, but Stan was the sort of the obvious influence in Stan's playing was Ellington and his writing. Mm-hmm. And I think that whole sort of percussive approach to playing the piano, which he just kind of nailed down. A lot of people said, "Oh, it's like Thelonious Monk," but that wasn't the idea. It was a drum thing that he was doing, and that kind of Ellingtonian kind of percussive commentary, as it were, on the piano.
Yeah.
Sort of clustered voicings and so on. But I never really got the chance to kind of hang out with Stan and listen and talk to him, because he's obviously someone who was around on the British jazz scene and was the house pianist at Ronnie's and accompanying all the visiting Americans, and I would have loved to have twisted his arm, grilled him about some of those experiences.
Yeah, I found out this morning that he's the pianist on the soundtrack to Alfie.
Right.
Did you know that?
I did.
You did?
I did know that.
I didn't know
but
that.
Not the soundtrack album, because the music in the film is not what was released on the record. On the record, they re-recorded a lot of the themes from the film.
Right.
And it was Roger Kellaway on piano, Mickey Roker and
really?
Bob Cranshaw, Barney Kessel. and the Oliver Nelson Big Band. So when you buy the soundtrack album, you're getting not the music, you're getting the music of the film, but not the music from the soundtrack.
Okay, but so it's Stan Tracey on the soundtrack that actually accompanies you to hear if you went to the cinema.
Yeah.
Okay, I had no idea that Stan Tracey was that. Yeah. And then my father having this, it was an album, the Bracknell Connection.
Right. Yeah.
1976 apparently, and I remember my father buying this because it was way over my head.
Right.
I thought, what is this exotic place, Bracknell?
Right.
And then I went,
Yeah. It's a commission.
To Bracknell.
Yeah, a composite. It's a commission
God,
from
I
the
must
festival.
go to this place, Bracknell. It must be intoxicating to produce music like this.
Yeah. But I saw Stan's Big Band a few times at Ronnie's.
Yeah.
And I saw Hexad when I was a kid, when they played in Newcastle. That was the band with Guy Barker, Jamie Tolbert, and Art Thiemann.
Okay.
Roy Babington and Tracey on drums. And Stan was
Clark is Stan's son, of course.
Yeah, and Stan's bands were always great because they sounded like Stan's bands. He had this kind of very strong identity, not just as a player, but as a writer and arranger.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Yeah. I remember seeing. I think it was. Do you remember a place called? I think it was the 500 Club at the back of Oxford Street.
not the 100 Club.
It's 100 Club. Sorry.
Yeah, 100 Club. Yeah.
Let's mix it up with the
Yeah, we
6
used to play there all the time. Do lunchtime sessions on a Friday.
It can't be still there.
I don't think so.
No.
But don't ask me. It may well be. But
Yeah, okay. And do you play the 606 in Chelsea?
haven't for years.
But you have done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's someone was asking me about this. And then. I mean, there's Humphrey Lyttelton, and we've talked about Humphrey Lyttelton before, haven't we? But, I mean, that must have been an extraordinary experience for a young player as well. And you must have met tons of British greats through Humphrey. Worked with them,
Yeah, Kathy Stobart in particular.
Yeah.
I would say, as a sort of as an emblem of an era of British jazz, and as just a kind of an amazing natural musician.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met her, by the time I sort of met her and was playing with Hump's band, Kathy was getting on and not that strong, but she had this just incredible will to make music. That was the thing. When you listen to the young Kathy on record, she sounds like Al Cohn.
Mm-hmm.
She's incredibly inventive in the way she constructs lines and so on. And although she didn't have, when I met her, she didn't have the technique that she had when she was young. She just had that same kind of, it's like, she didn't really have any licks. She just kind of made shit up. We all have licks, and we all make shit up as well.
Yeah.
And the licks are the hooks that you hang the shit you make up on. but she just seemed to kind of like, okay, go. She was.
But I mean, the surprising thing about that is that, I mean, how many women instrumentalists were there in those days?
Yeah, I mean, there was obviously the Ivy Benson band,
Okay,
and the women who came down to the band, but to make it as a kind of star soloist,
Yeah, exactly.
was a different deal altogether.
That's the surprising thing, isn't it? Now, when you look back, and now when there are so many women in bands, so many all women bands, particularly here. I mean, it's extremely common, to come across it.
Yeah.
I mean, you haven't got any in yours,
No, just the band leader.
It's just the band leader, just the band leader. And finally, I mean, can I ask you? I have to ask you about Bryan Ferry, because I didn't ask you about Bryan Ferry last time, and I think you've worked with Bryan Ferry.
Yeah. Well, worked with
when and how?
Yeah,
He's 71. I cannot believe he's 71. He looks bloody great.
So I played on a couple of, I think it was a couple, I can't remember exactly because it's a while ago, a couple of recording sessions of his. So back in 96, 95, something like that. The band that I was playing in at the Ritz, Vile Bodies, which was a sort of 1930s style swing band.
Yes.
And Stacey was singing in it at the time, was involved in playing a song for the opening sequence of Ian McKellen's Richard III movie.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure how that connected the band to Bryan Ferry. I think possibly because Bryan Ferry was going to do some music for the film, but didn't. But there was some sort of connection that was made either tangentially or directly through that film that led to the musical director of Vile Bodies, Colin Good, pianist and arranger, being engaged by Bryan to be the MD for an album that he wanted to make of standards in a sort of 1930s style. He wanted to do a sort of crooning thing.
Well, I mean, he'd done that. He'd done covers of lots of standards,
right?
Hadn't he? Before,
These Foolish Things,
These Foolish Things, another time.
But I think that was what he was doing at that time. And then obviously because I knew Colin, Colin asked me to come down and play on the recording sessions.
Okay.
So.
I was just terribly impressed because I love Bryan Ferry.
Yeah.
And then now, more recently, he's done he's done 2 albums. I've forgotten what the name of the orchestra is, and he just does sort of 1920s, 30s style covers of songs from that era.
Right.
It's kind of like the Pasadena Roof Orchestra or something.
Right.
It's not, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a very specific
Yeah.
style. I mean, God knows why he does it. It can't possibly be.
Well, one can only imagine that he has a sincere enthusiasm for the music.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I find him interesting, because he obviously knows his jazz, doesn't he? And all those years of doing, every dream.
Right.
He's sort of whistling away these foolish things in his head.
Yeah.
I mean, and you listen to the saxes on any Roxy music thing, and I guess it's the thing about pop performers from the 70s and 60s. They all knew their jazz, didn't they?
Right. And also, the blues scene at the time, which was, they're sort of an age where that kind of trad and blues revival of the 50s and so on had an impact on the pop music.
Yeah. Do you see any of that today? Or do you just see 2 very discrete camps that are so far away as...
What, in terms of pop music?
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, has it damaged pop music that younger players don't know their jazz?
I really wouldn't want to comment broadly because I kind of don't know enough.
No.
But what I'd say is, I like melody and harmony. And
are they a good group? They sound like 2 nice girls.
I like melody and harmony, and show me.
Cut your hair, do you think? Melody and harmony.
Show me a pop song with melody and harmony, and I'll consider listening to it. But there aren't any.
There aren't.
So.
Yeah. I just you don't listen to.
So the points of commonality between the music that certainly that I play and that I'm interested in is there are very few points of interest. I heard an interesting discussion amongst a band backstage at Birdland that was actually very heated on this very topic.
Really?
Just discussing.
Was it a jazz? It was a jazz band.
It was a jazz band, and they were discussing the difference between the music that they were playing, right? Well, these were young people. I'm assuming in their 20s and 30s, right? And they were asking themselves, why aren't young people in their 20s and 30s coming to listen to our music?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it centered around this whole discussion. It's frankly, I don't care who listens to our music.
No.
I'm happy that anyone does. So Not that I'm surprised that anyone does, but I'm happy when anyone listens to our music.
But I just wondered, because if you look at something like Billy Paul's, I think it is Billy Paul's, isn't it? Me and Mrs. Jones.
Right.
There's the bit at the beginning is actually just lifted straight off Once I Had a Secret Love.
Right.
And I'm thinking, Paul knew his jazz. Mm-hmm. He was able to do that.
Right.
Because he had this rich musical background, either through formal education or he simply acquired it.
Yep.
And I wonder whether, I don't listen to modern pop music, but I hear it because the kids play it. And I think I never hear any of these allusions in pop music.
Yeah.
I just, I think are we losing something as a result of that? Maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I try not to get exercised about these things.
Yeah, no. Well, thank you, Jim, very much.
It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure to chat.
I've enjoyed it. Next time we are going to do Around the World in 80 days.
Okay.
48 hours, whatever it is.
All right.
I hope you have a lovely tour. Are you going to Japan next week and China?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Japan, Poland, then Japan, then China, then Japan.
Poland, Japan, China, and coming back to Europe?
Back to Europe.
Okay. Yeah. So when do you go back to the US?
Back end of November.
Okay, right.
Then we'll come back to Europe to finish out the year.
Okay.
Playing Portugal, France and Bulgaria.
Bulgaria, is that a new one?
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much. And
Pleasure.
See you soon.
Thanks.